The machines looked almost mythic in the desert, crouched low against the sand with long guns pointed toward a horizon that rarely seemed to change. But the M1A1 Abrams tank and the Bradley cavalry fighting vehicle were not magic weapons, and 73 Easting was not won because one army simply owned better steel. The real story is more interesting than that. American crews entered the Gulf with vehicles that gave them reach, protection, mobility, and an extraordinary ability to see in poor conditions. But those advantages only mattered because soldiers had trained hard enough to use them before the enemy could react. The desert became a place where technology, discipline, and decision-making fused together, and where a moment's advantage in seeing first could become the difference between survival and destruction.
If you would like to move beyond the podcast, you can see my available books at militaryauthor.me. And at trackpads.com, you will find magazines and galleries with hundreds of thousands of photos and videos to explore. The Abrams was the visible symbol of American armored power in 1991. To a listener imagining the battlefield without a map, think of it as the heavy center of the troops' punch, fast for its size, heavily protected, and built around a gun that could kill enemy tanks at long range. Its turbine engine gave it a distinctive sound and strong acceleration, while its stabilization system allowed trained crews to fire accurately while moving. That last point matters more than raw specifications. A tank that must stop to aim gives away time. A tank that can move, identify, and fire while the crew remains coordinated can turn movement itself into a weapon. The Abrams did not merely sit in the desert and trade shots. In the hands of good crews, it advanced, adjusted, and struck before many Iraqi crews fully understood they had been found.
The Bradley was different, and its role is often misunderstood by people who imagine armored warfare as a line of tanks alone. In the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment, the Bradley cavalry fighting vehicle carried scouts and added its own weapons to the fight. It was lighter than an Abrams, less protected, and not meant to replace a tank in a head-on slugging match. But it could observe, maneuver, carry dismounted scouts, fire its chain gun against lighter vehicles and positions, and use anti-tank missiles against armored threats. In a cavalry troop, that combination mattered enormously. The Bradleys widened the troops' eyes and hands. They helped turn a collection of vehicles into a reconnaissance force capable of fighting for information, not merely waiting for the tanks to solve everything. Thermal sights were the third piece of the story, and in the storm they may have seemed almost supernatural to the men who had them. A thermal sight does not see the world the way the human eye does. It detects heat, allowing a crew to pick out the warmth of engines, vehicles, and bodies against a cooler background, especially at night or through some forms of obscuration. In the Gulf, where dust, smoke, darkness, and wind could shrink ordinary visibility, that was a profound advantage. Iraqi vehicles hidden to the naked eye could appear as ghostly shapes in American sights. But even here, the word advantage must be used carefully. A thermal image is not a decision. A trained crew still has to recognize what it is seeing, judge distance, avoid friendly targets, and fire correctly under stress. The Iraqi army had tanks too, and some of them were dangerous weapons in the right circumstances. Iraqi units fielded Soviet-designed vehicles such as T-72s, T-62s, and older T-55s, along with armored personnel carriers and artillery. Many were dug into revetments or defensive positions, which could make them harder to see and harder to hit from certain angles. A tank in a prepared position can be a deadly ambush weapon, especially if the attacker is careless or forced into a narrow approach. But Iraqi crews were often fighting with weaker sensors, less flexible command, poorer night fighting ability, and the cumulative effects of weeks of bombing, disrupted communications, and uncertain leadership. The result was not that Iraqi tanks were harmless, it was that they often entered the decisive moment late. That lateness is central to understanding 73 Easting. Armored combat rewards the side that completes the cycle first. Detect, identify, decide, fire, move, and report. The Americans did not need every vehicle to be invulnerable, and they did not need every shot to be perfect. They needed enough crews to see first, shoot accurately, and keep moving before the Iraqi defense could organize a coherent answer. Thermal sights helped them begin that cycle earlier. The Abrams and Bradley gave them the weapons to act on what they saw. Training and leadership kept the cycle from becoming chaos. This is why the battle cannot be reduced to a showroom comparison between tank models. The real contest was between systems of fighting.
A tank crew is a small world under pressure. The commander watches the battlefield, receives and sends radio traffic, chooses targets, and keeps the vehicle inside the troop's larger movement. The gunner finds and engages targets. The loader keeps the main gun fed and may handle other urgent tasks inside the turret. The driver, partly isolated in his own position, keeps the vehicle moving as ordered, feeling terrain through the machine as much as seeing it. In combat, all of this has to happen quickly and almost rhythmically. A hesitation by one man slows the others. A clear command, a smooth lay of the gun, a driver's steady movement, and a loader's practice speed can make a tank seem faster than the clock itself. The Bradley crew faced its own burden. Scouts had to observe and report, but they also had to survive in a battlefield where information was often purchased at close range. The Bradley's weapons gave cavalry troops flexibility against bunkers, trucks, infantry positions, and armored vehicles, but its survival depended on movement, spacing, terrain use, and cooperation with Abrams tanks. It could not simply behave like a smaller tank and expect the same results. Used well, it extended the troops' awareness and striking power. Used carelessly, it could become vulnerable in front of enemy armor or anti-tank weapons. The 2D Armored Cavalry Regiment's strength lay partly in understanding that each vehicle had a job, and that the troop fought best when those jobs overlapped without becoming confused. The desert made sensors more important because it played tricks on human perception. On a clear day, the openness could suggest that everything was visible, but distance flattens judgment, and dust can hide whole formations. In a shamal, the regional dust storm that haunted the campaign, the world could close down into a brown-gray blur. Vehicles disappeared, reappeared, and left hanging trails behind them. A commander trying to maintain formation had to think not only about the enemy, but about where friendly vehicles were in relation to his own. In that environment, thermal sights gave American crews a kind of second battlefield layered over the first. The eye saw dust and emptiness. The thermal viewer might reveal heat, movement, and danger. Yet technology also creates temptation. It can make the side that has it believe the battlefield is clearer than it really is. A heat signature may be an enemy tank, but it may also be a disabled vehicle, a friendly vehicle in the wrong place, or something that needs a few more seconds of judgment before firing. Modern armored war compresses time until those seconds feel intolerably expensive. That is why identification training, fire discipline, and command control mattered so much. The same tools that allowed American crews to dominate Iraqi vehicles in poor visibility also created the risk of tragic mistakes in a fast, crowded fight. The Gulf War would show both truths. Technology could make a unit lethal, and technology could not abolish confusion. The Abrams and Bradley also depended on maintenance and supply in ways that rarely appear in dramatic battle accounts. The Abrams was powerful, but it consumed fuel heavily and required constant attention from crews and mechanics. Tracks, filters, optics, weapons systems, radios, and engines had to be kept working despite sand and long movement. Bradleys needed the same daily care, especially because cavalry operations put them forward in rough conditions where breakdowns could leave gaps in the screen. A vehicle that wins on paper but fails in the field is no advantage at all. By the time the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment moved towards 73 Easting, its combat power rested on hundreds of unglamorous acts: cleaning, checking, tightening, fueling, aligning, repairing, and testing. There is a straight line from the earliest tank battles to this moment, but it is not a simple line of bigger guns and thicker armor. At Cambrai, tanks were crude breakthrough machines, terrifying and unreliable, trying to cross trenches and wire. In the Second World War, armored warfare became faster and more integrated, tied to radios, infantry, artillery, engineers, and air support. By the Gulf War, the decisive edge increasingly lay in the ability to see, communicate, and act at night, or in obscured conditions, while moving across operational distances. The tank had not stopped being a weapon of shock. It had become a node in a wider system of sensors, radios, training, and command initiative. The crew inside the vehicle mattered as much as the armor around it. At 73 Easting, the Americans would use these tools in exactly the kind of conditions where their value became visible. Dust reduced the old battlefield of eyesight. Iraqi positions were not always obvious until they were suddenly there.
The cavalry was moving ahead of a corps, not conducting a tidy demonstration on a range. In that setting, the Abrams gave the troop killing power, the Bradleys gave it reconnaissance and flexibility, and thermals gave it the chance to see through part of the storm. But the human link remained decisive. A sight had to be used. A target had to be understood. A leader had to decide whether to halt, press, report, or fire. The machines expanded the choices available to the Americans, but men still had to make those choices. The importance of Abrams, Bradleys, and thermals is that they reveal what modern armored superiority really means. It is not a single wonder weapon, and not a clean victory of engineering over courage. Iraqi soldiers could still fight, kill, and die in their positions, and many did. But the American cavalry brought a better integrated system to the battle. Protected vehicles, powerful weapons, thermal vision, disciplined crews, clear radio habits, and leaders willing to act aggressively inside the mission. That system let them convert seconds into destruction and visibility into tempo. When the storm closed in around 73 Easting, the battle would not be decided by machines alone. It would be decided by trained crews using machines well, seeing first in a world of dust, and turning that first sight into action before the enemy could answer.
You've been listening to Famous Tank Battles. These battles were never just about machines. They were about doctrine, terrain, firepower, logistics, and the hard problem of turning shock into victory. For more military history writing and books, visit militaryauthor.me. And for magazines, podcasts, and a massive archive of military photos and video, visit trackpads.com. Thanks for listening.